Hello and welcome to Raider HQ After Dark. I'm your host Raider. And in this video, before we get started on the video, I was reviewing some of the metrics on the YouTube Studio account, and it looks as though about half of the viewers are not subscribed. So this is my shameless plug to try to get anybody who, watches the content and likes the content. If you want to, you can give, like and subscribe. That being said, I'd also like to take the time to thank everybody that is liked and subscribed and that is supporting the channel. You guys rock. Thank you so much. But back to the video. So this video is about a recent change that happened on 9/30/2025 to the M21 manual. And let me go ahead and share that right now. What has happened is the VA has added a new section or a few new sections to the manual in regards to infertility. Now, if you look here, there's three separate entries. We're only going to be talking about the top one, the one that has to do with development and rating as part of 5.2.3.C. I will be listing the other two, but what they did was they made a macro summary of everything that they were talking about in this first manual reference, and then they provide within the male and female sections of the genitourinary system. They kind of took all the male stuff out of that main summary and put it in the male section, and then did the same for the female section. So I'm not gonna. It would be redundant to go through all three. So I'm just going to go through the top one here. Now, let me go ahead and share my screen on that, and let's go ahead and make the screen bigger. So this is the actual change. So it's dated September 30th, 2025. Now, I need to give you a little bit of backstory here as to why this particular section of the manual needed to be added. So historically, veterans would claim infertility as a disability. And the quality review team, they didn't have a good answer for how the raters should rate infertility, whether or not it should be a residual of something that was causing it, or whether or not it could be its own standalone thing, how erectile dysfunction and FSAD are, and then you would get a special monthly compensation for them. So it was kind of the Wild West up until, well, 9/30/2025, in which you could get granted in many different ways. So you could have five different veterans that had infertility that were positively granted, that had five different ways in which they granted it. So what this does is this kind of sets a boundary for how the VSR should develop for it, because it provides new criteria for the infertility, but also it provides the raters with, you can only go this way with it. So you can only rate it this way. So it kind of cleans up the process a little bit. Now, if you're somebody who has had infertility granted historically, and let's say that your specific rating in your case doesn't jive with this new rule, because it's not a liberalizing law or anything, they're not going to change your rating. So, and there's a reason why that might be important for some of you, and we'll get to that later on in the video. But let me kind of walk through here, and we're just going to read along with each other, and we're going to talk about infertility. So, for the purpose of service-connected disability benefits is the inability to successfully procreate. Now, what I like here is they've put this caveat to where you're not going to get some biased rater. Like, they took the ability for a biased rater to gatekeep infertility. So they're like, well, wait a minute, you could medically, I don't know, you could medically freeze your sperm and do this and that and the other. Like, they've made it to where the inability to successfully procreate with or without medical intervention. So that keeps it honest. That keeps all the raters honest. I like this portion of it. As a result of the veteran service connected disability. Now, here's where a change happened. And it's not necessarily a change that I like, because this right here is now saying that the infertility has to be the result of a veteran's service connected injury and or disease or disability or something. Now, why does that matter? Well, historically, If you were like, let's say you had a BDD claim, and for whatever reason, you found out that you were infertile. You had a lab finding showing that you were infertile, and you could technically, historically, pre 9/30/2025, you could have granted that, and depending on the disposition of the rater, they could have granted this unknownly caused infertility. You just happened to be infertile while you got that test result, unfortunately, while on service, in active duty service. So this is a change. They have taken that ability away to have spontaneous infertility from service. Now you must, and this is an absolute, this harkens back to my my you can lead a horse to water thing. This is the undebatable fact that they want to put in there. They're restricting it down to it has to be due to a injury or disease. Okay. Now, injury or disease, or it could be due to a treatment for a disease. So you have a little bit of wiggle room in there, but not too much. It still has to be traced back to a disorder. So, and one that's service connected. So let's move on. So yeah, this change is big. It does discriminate potentially against some of the newer service members that might be getting out, that might have infertility due to a number of reasons. They're just etiology or pre-cause is known. So if you're somebody with infertility and you don't know the cause, before you file a claim, you've got to figure that out, number one. And number two, try to get the thing that caused it service connected. So moving on. So this is rating a claim. So this is the rater. This section talks to the rater. Do not, and I mean it's in bold and black. This is irrefutable, guys. Like, so whatever this says, we have to do it. There's no debating this. Do not establish service connection for infertility. So we can no longer separately, independently grant infertility itself as a standalone condition for compensation purposes. Instead, a claim for infertility should be accepted as a claim for the underlying injury. Now, there's a little bit of a poison pill in here. Okay. Let's say that you are you're infertile due to diabetes, let's say. Well, if you're established for diabetes and you're high on the diabetes scale, claiming infertility will also potentially be a claim for increase for the underlying injury. Similar to how if you've never claimed radiculopathy before and you're claiming your radiculopathy is due to your thoracolumbar spine. When you claim that new radiculopathy, it causes an increase exam on the thoracolumbar spine. This could potentially be similar in some cases. If we come up here, if it's due to an injury, not so much, but if it's due to a diseases that are have built-in secondaries on their disability benefits questionnaires, this could cause a claim for increase. So this is cautionary. Okay, if you're going to claim infertility from September 30th on, and it's due to a condition that's part of a disease process, it's too soon to tell how the rating process overall across the nation is going to settle on this fact. So I'm putting it out there as a cautionary tale that if it's part of a disease process, I'm thinking mostly of diabetes, that if you claim infertility due to it, it could cause an increase exam. So be wary of that. Make sure that your evidence for your primary condition, because this is almost like a secondary, you're almost claiming it like a secondary for infertility. Make sure that your primary condition's evidence is up to date. You've seen a doctor, that you can show and establish and prove that whatever percent you have for the primary is still valid before you do the infertility. It's me being overly cautious, but I don't want you to get blindsided by, just something weird. So anyway, or disease causing infertility and rated as such. So how that would turn out is I'm just going to use diabetes here, but if infertility was caused by your diabetes, you would have diabetes mellitus type 2 with infertility. That's how it would be named. So it would get the with situation. And then we have some notes down here. So VA decision makers are not permitted to draw medical conclusions. Okay. Now this should be a given, right? Like this should be a given that we can't draw medical conclusions. I have seen a lot of content creators think that raters can draw medical conclusions. That is false. Okay? When a rater starts drawing medical conclusions, we're outside the normal duties. We're outside of the scope of practice of the rater at that time. So, but what was happening is that the infertility would cause, historically, the way that infertility worked, it caused the raters to have to start making medical conclusions in order to at least rate it somehow. So that's why they've taken this away. That's why they've added this entire system, and that's why they've kind of ratcheted down on this process. Now, another thing, the BVA will not consider infertility the way that the VBA does. So if you have a situation where your infertility was maybe caused by service or caused in service, the VBA will see it as a negative and deny it. Once they deny it, you might have better luck in the BVA, the Board of Veterans Appeals, because they're not bound by this manual reference here. So, anyway, that's just a tip for if that was your fact pattern for how you got it. Now, we're not to draw medical conclusions about the existence of infertility or an underlying cause. So you have to bring the cause. We can't do that. We can't reasonably raise it anymore. We can't say, "Oh, I can see how losing a testicle could cause infertility." You've got to make that connection. If you don't make that connection, we can't do it for you. This manual reference prevents us from doing that. Um, if there's no evidence supporting it. If there's medical evidence supporting it, then we lean on the medical evidence to make that connection for you. And this is the thing here. I don't like the way they said this because it's like only competent medical evidence can establish a diagnosis or etiology. So I would be wary about this. This is a vulnerability. The term competent is a vulnerability. So what that means is we get to discriminate against certain medical providers. And it weirds me out that's because the rater gets to decide what's competent. So I guess you, as the veteran, unless you have a medical degree, are not competent to make that correlation, that causal relationship. But yeah, I don't like the way that they wrote this because some raters are looking for outs like this because they would be like, "Hey, I did a competency review, and that provider's not competent. They're just a nurse practitioner." Or they're a dentist or whatever. I mean, that might be true. Like if they're a dentist saying that A caused B, I might question that too. But anyway, so I just find the wording of this very odd. If a VA examination shows a diagnosis of infertility but does not identify an underlying disease or cause, return the examination for clarification. Okay, so this, guys, is why you want to front load your claim with that cause. You want your doctor to say the infertility is caused by so and so, because what this is telling the rater is if the examiner, you go to a VA examination, and obviously, if you have a private DBQ from a private provider, this is going to kind of also be true. If the private provider doesn't provide, or the VA examiner doesn't provide a reason, right, doesn't identify the underlying disease, injury, or cause of the infertility, then that VA examination has to be delayed. We've got to defer it back to have a clarification or an insufficiency review done to where they have to clarify their statements. Now, if it's a private DBQ and the examiner didn't provide the infertility cause and that it's service connected, that the cause is service connected, that invalidates the private DBQ. It's not even worth any paper. That's what this is telling us right here. So, if after a thorough review of both medical and lay evidence, an underlying disease or injury is not identified as the cause of the claim of infertility, follow the instructions in 5 M21-1 and this is, and let's see if it does it. It doesn't let me do it. This is called clarifying the issues. So I did a video on clarifying the issues, but that manual reference, what it says is that we've got to like defer back and have you clarify what caused it. So this further delays the claim. So if you saw how I think it was my video before last for the things that can delay your claim for like a week or a month, clarifying the issue. Yeah, this is just where the rater will have to defer back to the VSR, and the VSR will have to call the veteran in order to clarify what the causal disease is. Now, because this change just happened, what you're going to find is that not all VSRs are catching this. They won't catch this. Learning a new change to the manual takes some time for them. They have to add it to their process. They've got to do a whole bunch of stuff. So anybody that's filing for infertility, expect to have some tacked on development time, some just unnecessary development time, maybe on your part, maybe on the VA's part, because this is new. And then if we go down here further, so now we're talking about what happens whenever you do claim, and let's say that we grant. So when service connection is granted for a condition resulting in infertility, we're supposed to award SMCK for loss of use of a creative organ. So that could be for the male and it could be for the female. Both sides can have that. Now, one of the questions I think somebody might ask is, if I'm infertile and I have, like, let's say FSAD and I have erectile dysfunction, if, for a male and for a female, respectively, type situation, can I get both? Can I get SMCK for the erectile dysfunction and can I get SMCK for the infertility? And under the current regulations, the answer would be no. If you have erectile dysfunction, you have SMCK for loss of use of the creative organ. The creative organ also encompasses reproduction, and that's the kind of creative portion of the creative organ. So if you don't, so this can be a tricky thing for infertility because there's no additional benefit to doing it at present, if you have SMCK already for your reproductive genitourinary conditions. Now, here are some examples for involving infertility. Veteran files a claim for service connection for infertility. The evidence shows a diagnosis of endometriosis beginning in service, with treatment for endometriosis and infertility treatments post-service. VA examiner diagnosis endometriosis with resultant infertility. Grant service connection for endometriosis, the underlying disease that caused the infertility. Do not establish service connection for infertility. Award SMC based upon loss of use of a creative organ. Now, this is a horrible example for the rater, because what we have to justify why we have the SMCK. So you have to name this this right here. Like, this would have to be the name of the condition. If we just granted endometriosis, then Post would throw a fit and go, wait a minute, what qualified you to grant SMC? What's SMC related to? Now, the SMC section of the grant, you're supposed to describe what the cause is, but a lot of raters don't. There's a blow-in section to the SMC, and they kind of just leave it like that. And most QRT don't bother them on it. But what you're supposed to get is you're supposed to get endometriosis with a resultant infertility, and then you're supposed to have a separate rating for SMC, special monthly compensation K, that's awarded for, due to the endometriosis with resultant infertility. But that's basically it. Okay, a veteran who is service connected for type 2 diabetes mellitus files a claim for infertility, shows that the service connection was established. The veteran's developed erectile dysfunction, no worsening of the underlying diabetic process is shown. So this right here This right here in this example tells us that we're going to be reviewing to see if an increased exam is warranted. Now, this is wishful thinking because if we're reviewing for whether or not an increased exam is warranted, you sure as heck know that the VSR is going to order that unnecessary exam just to order it, just to get points. So, for the most part, because somebody could say that they should have gotten it. So, VSRs will behave in a way that they get more points while also reducing the chances of them getting an error. They're going to do that. So just expect to get an exam for it. So we would grant service connection for erectile dysfunction as a complication of diabetes type 2 mellitus, the underlying disease that causes infertility. Do not establish service connection for infertility. Award SMC. So this is what I was talking about before, where you can't stack SMCs on top of each other. So for the disease process one, the way that this would look is it would be diabetes mellitus type 2 with erectile dysfunction and infertility. That's the way we should name it. And you should only get one SMCK under the current M21 manual. And then the final example is a veteran files a claim for infertility but does not claim or identify an underlying cause of the infertility and is not service connected for any disabilities that could account for the infertility. A thorough review of the evidence does not identify any underlying injury, disease, or causing infertility. The claim processor attempts to contact the veteran for clarification for the claim, which has to happen. So this delays your claim to do the contact as outlined in M20, but is unsuccessful. Deny the infertility. So the infertility would be denied. Now, okay, I have a problem with this one. And the problem that I have is if we deny infertility, that is a disability. You know how we can't grant a disability on its own? We can't grant infertility as a separate condition. Well, we also can't deny it as a separate condition, because there's no DC code for it. So what this example should have done is it should have said return the VSR should consider this condition an insufficient claim. This should be an insufficient claim because they didn't identify the disability in question that caused it. So this would be an insufficient claim issue. And that's how we should treat it, because the rater shouldn't adjudicate this. We shouldn't deny it because we don't have enough evidence to tie it to. Once you start tying things to DC codes separately, it begins to encourage raters to grant it separately. So this example right here kind of somewhat undoes the entire purpose of why they wrote this. They wrote it because you can't separately grant it. Well, you shouldn't be able to separately deny it either. And I'm mostly speaking to raters that are talking about this. I might go see, like for me personally, I would go to my QRT and say, or I would write a code sheet note and say, hey, look, I'm deferring this back because the premise of, yada, yada, 532 says that I can't adjudicate this separately. So if I deny it separately, I will violate this. So I'm going to defer it back and I'm going to do directed development to the VSR, and I'm going to tell them to do a sufficiency review, whether or not the claim is complete for the claimed infertility. And if not, then I'm going to have them just do the insufficient claim. I'm not saying that right word. It's not an insufficient claim. It's a well, maybe this, but anyway, I digress. So this is a bad example. I hate it whenever they write examples that contradict what they said to begin with. But anyway, that's about all I've got for the new addition to the claims involving infertility. Now, this might not affect any of you guys, but anytime we get a new manual thing, I want to talk about it. So anyway, that's about all I got for you guys today on this one. I'm going to try to edit this. There's a few flubs in here, but other than that, like I said in the beginning, if you watched until the end and you're not subscribed, please do so. We'd love to have you in the Raider Nation, as they say. And if you are already subscribed and you are a member, thank you. And you guys don't have to do that. I appreciate when you do that. It's more than you know, but yeah. And then video stuff, I'm going to be probably also doing my I'm doing MST video, pretty deep dive on MST. I'm going to be doing that either today or tomorrow. I just wanted to put this one out there because it's a recent change and it's kind of a big deal. I'll include all the manual references in the video description, but yeah, that's about all I got for you. Me and the dogs, thank you. Raider out.